Welcome into the OBR streaming network. This is a brand new edition of the React. My name is Brad Ward. The man next to me is the always fantastic Pete Smith. Good to see you here with us tonight. Joining us, filing into the chat. Go ahead and hit that like button, see what happens, and it'll help us out a little bit. Thanks for tuning in as we close in on 10,000 subscribers. So everyone counts. Tell a friend and make sure you're subscribed so you can catch all of our shows 5 nights a week here at the OBR. What's going on, Pete? How are you doing, brother?
I'm all right. Interesting news day. Still, obviously, in this sort of dead period as far as actual, football playing stuff goes. But nevertheless, the timing of news releases has worked out, I suppose, in our favor.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get into all of that, the collusion stuff. We've got a couple other videos and talk a little bit about what this offense could look like. Best case scenario in 2025. You wrote an article this week, today, on the running backs, more so, not on Quinshawn, but more so on Dylan Sampson and what he can provide for the offense, especially maybe with their shortage of wide receivers and, Harold Fannin kind of alluding to that they could get creative with both their tight ends and running backs.
Well, I mean, the receiver position has more questions than answers. Obviously, it's Jerry Jeudy and then Cedric Tillman. After that, huge question marks. David Njoku's headlines the tight end group. And then, there's positive talk about Deontay Johnson, but if he's not here by the time training camp opens up, would it shock me? Not really. I don't know what to make of that. Is there talk of hopefully Jamari Thrash is going to step up in year 2? Okay. And then you've got 15 other guys that no one's ever heard of. Yeah. And if one of those guys can make a name for themselves, that's a home run. Yeah. But failing that, or if somebody gets hurt or whatever, it stands to reason the Browns are going to look to the tight end, the other tight end, Harold Fannin, who's going to get every opportunity to play for this offense, unquestionably. And then the running game and the running backs in general. Obviously, the running backs, the running game is going to be huge for this team. They have to be able to run the ball. But when when the Browns took Quinshon Judkins 36th overall, I went into the draft hoping they'd take 2 running backs. I thought they'd take 2 on day 3 and just sort of see who could, make it work of those guys. But when they took Judkins 36th, there was a thought that maybe that was just going to be it. Yeah. They'd bring back Chubb, roll with him and Ford, maybe bring in an undrafted rookie. And then when they doubled down with Dylan Sampson, not only did sort of set the tone for where this thing was going, both in terms of turning it over to the young guys, but you took Judkins 36th. It stands to reason, and everything obviously unpadded. We don't know anything for sure, but he looks the part of a guy who's going to be your top tier running back. He's going to be the feature back most likely. They didn't draft Dylan Sampson just to sort of sit around and occasionally get carries. He's also barely 5'8", 200 pounds. He's not the guy you would sort of draw up to sit in there and be, absorb pass protection. Not to say you can't, but more than likely, you're not going to have him do that. So what can you do in that situation? Well, 1, you could obviously have him run routes from that spot, but 2, you can split him out. Or what the Browns have done in their past is when they've been good is Kevin Stefanski really likes to, maneuver in and out of, different formations. For example, start in a 2-back look and then break out and suddenly be an empty when they had Chubb and Kareem Hunt. The game where Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson went at each other in prime time, that high-scoring affair where Lamar may or may not have pooped himself. One of the things the Browns did that absolutely put the Ravens in a bind after a slow start was they kept putting Kareem Hunt on the boundary, and he kept forcing coverage to a corner. And that really opened up the rest of the passing offense, and suddenly they were cooking. They could easily do that. Judkins is skilled enough as a receiving threat, but Dylan Sampson is, I mentioned the size. He's fast. He's got decent stopwatch speed, 4.42, but he's just got good acceleration. And he was good enough to carry Tennessee's offense. So it's very reasonable to think that if they want to just take what they did with Dylan Sampson, Tennessee would, since that head coach has been there, they've often done that whole Baylor spread thing where they have the 4 wide receivers so far out that it stretches everything. And then you occasionally see like Tennessee's running game going as a 5-man box, particularly ridiculous when they had Jalen Wright because Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt were still there. And it really put them in a bind. This year, they didn't have quite that level of talent. So yes, they were able to get some of those looks, but they also ran some condensed formations and then just sort of sent Dylan Sampson to put his foot in the ground and just go on a foot race to the sideline. He'd win and then turn it up and go that way. So if you're the Browns, you can take him out of the backfield, put him in sort of the slot or somewhere else, just throw him the ball. If he's on one guy and he can make that guy miss, suddenly you've got a whole lot of offense. Then you add in this whole other element, which Kevin Stefanski has been seeking since he's been here as the head coach, which is the jet guy. This got a lot of attention when Anthony Schwartz was drafted in the 3rd round because it was something they really wanted him to do. But they've had other guys do it. Kadero Hodge was the jet guy when they went to the playoffs. Somebody who's going to consistently be a guy they use in motion, a guy who they can either hand the ball to or create some manufactured touches, a guy who can put stress on a defense and force them to account for him in some form or fashion. Now, Dylan Sampson being a running back, it's beneficial if they do want to actually hand a jet sweep or quick screens or some of those things because he's accustomed to operating in sort of short area quickness, making guys miss. Now, he's not ideal for throwing the ball to because he's small. But if he can force the right matchup and you suddenly send him on a wheel or something, or he catches a pass or whatever, that's an opportunity to get yardage. In addition, it forces the defense to then account for the guy. People hated Anthony Schwartz, but rest assured, somebody was covering him every play because you had to. And it did create space for the rest of the offense, even if he wasn't doing a whole lot, save for that Buccaneers game. He basically helped the Browns win. That's the same thing for Sampson. They've got to figure out a plan for him. Are they going to dedicate a linebacker to him? Probably not. He's probably too fast. Safety, maybe. And then in certain situations, just based on how teams play coverage or the rules of their defense, it could be a corner. And suddenly that's a corner that's not covering Jerry Jeudy. That's a corner that's not covering Cedric Tillman or something along those lines. So if you play a team, let's use the Baltimore Ravens as an example, and you manage to force them to have Marlon Humphrey cover a running back, that's a win for you. Quinshon Judkins is still probably going to end up in the backfield. You still got to account for him. You've got Njoku, you've got Jeudy, you've got all these other things. So in that scenario, now Dylan Sampson, who was good enough to carry an SEC offense at 20 years old, is now potentially the 4th or 5th guy in the Browns offense. And while it doesn't sort of fit in the mold people have, it could be effective. He's got a lot to prove from that standpoint. But you look at some of these sort of water bug type, that generic cliche for some of these guys, but like, different running backs around the league, Darren Sproles, Dude New Orleans, even some of these receivers like Tyreek Hill. He's not a Tyreek Hill level athlete, but Tyreek Hill is tiny. So it just opens up the amount of opportunities that Dylan Sampson could potentially contribute. And there's every incentive for the Browns to get both of these running backs in the offense contributing and find ways to put pressure on opposing defenses and gain advantages.
2 questions. Question 1, do you expect Judkins to start as the Browns 1A back?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd be stunned if he wasn't. I mean, look, I like Jerome Ford, but look, one, the investment's there. Quinshon Judkins is an absolute freak show in terms of athleticism. I broke down Chubb when he came out. He's not that guy. Chubb was on a different level than most anyone. It was still amazing that he went where he went. Even more amazing that the GM at the time, who I hate forever, wanted Rashad Penny, and Seahawks took him, so they ended up settling for Chubb. But just in terms of everything else, and Judkins might offer more as receiving threat, which, again, given the receiving options the Browns have, may be more important this year. Even though I think for the most part, I guess we'll see how it plays out, but for the most part, I think defenses are going to be so focused on Judkins that it's going to hopefully allow other guys to contribute.
You're all good, McLaughlin. Love you, brother. Glad you're back in here. The second question I have is, you talked about motion in the article, pre-snap motion. Now, this is something that there's a direct correlation. There's some context to it, of course, but there's a direct correlation from pre-snap motion to offensive success in the NFL, right? There just is over the past few years. The Browns, one of the things I talked about last offseason was that I would like to see them use more motion, as they were after 2023, they were lower in the league in motion. They didn't, and they haven't. And I know there's the difference between motion just for motion's sake, and there's motion for
important note.
But I did just want to just show this, that, so obviously they weren't good on offense last year, but you see they went down in motion use from 23 to 24. The league averages, the league averages at 65%, and the Browns are down at like 44%. And if you look at like some of the best offenses, the Packers, the Lions, 88, 82, the Bills, 79, Ravens, 67, Chiefs, 78. It just seems like now, what can you say about last year? Of course, they were trying to figure things out, right? With you have to have a guy, probably a quarterback that you trust in place to get that advanced, I would guess, is probably part of this, right? But like, it would be nice to have an offense in place where they felt like they could get into more of that stuff, because it is beneficial.
Well, there's a couple elements that were not good last year that need to be better this year, that could make a big difference. And one part,
penalties.
That's a third one. That's a good point. Pre-snap penalties were abysmal. There were too many situations where the Browns were too slow on the operation, and when you do that and you're trying to beat the play clock, you can't motion. But the other part about this comes down to the quarterback position. And this is one of those things where people don't take this stuff into account when it comes to the quarterback competition and who's going to win that job. Because one, the play call operation has to be efficient. Kevin Stefanski taking over should help alleviate that to a point. But then it comes down to the quarterback, getting guys up to the line of scrimmage, being able to properly evaluate and diagnose what the defense is doing pre-snap, being able to know what you're supposed to check into in the right situation, and then having enough play clock that you can actually execute the motion, be able to see what has sort of been revealed. I mean, motion's obviously a very basic way teams like to sort of reveal if the opponent is in man or some kind of zone. But like, all of this sounds good unless you have somebody who's not efficient enough, which is a big ask for a rookie, and it limits what they can do. Like, if you can get the quarterback to the line of scrimmage, he's able to do all these things, and suddenly, like, Baker Mayfield in 2020 was so good at this stuff. And the game that I go back to is what they did to the Bengals in Cincinnati, where they put up like 40 some on them. The Bengals were consistently misaligned, out of position, and the Browns just absolutely ripped them apart. And they were just clicking. They were so fast in being able to get everything going and having a quarterback who could handle everything and do it appropriately. Now, I would assume, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Joe Flacco is going to be able to do that. And we saw when Joe Flacco was able to run the offense when he took over, there were better results. Now, off the top of my head, I don't have I'm not sure I can recognize whether or not that was a big difference. And then the other part, which I didn't mention, which has been another factor the past 2 years, is their offensive tackle situation has been horrible.
Yeah.
And motion is great for a lot of things. It also, one of the reasons you don't run motion is because now it changes the picture of the defense for the offensive line. So if you have guys who have been sort of thrown in there, or unproven guys or unsure guys, and you are constantly changing the picture. For example, if you motion a guy from the left side of the formation to the right side of the formation, and now there was somebody on the left who's now potentially blitzing, and somebody on the right who's now moving out to account for that guy, it changes the picture for the line. The center's got to make the appropriate call. The line's got to be able to recognize it. And then that tackle or whoever has to be capable of making the adjustment to make the appropriate block. Because if not, and you're running a whole bunch of motion and the line's not doing it, then suddenly you've got guys screaming off the edge potentially, and your play gets destroyed in the backfield. So there's all these elements that sort of feed into why the Browns weren't doing these things, and just how many pieces, parts go into what makes an offense work. So, one, quarterback situation should hopefully be better this year. Remains to be seen. That's obviously the biggest question mark. We'd like to think the play calling situation will be better because we have evidence to go with that. Jack Conklin's an excellent tackle. DeJuan Jones has a lot to prove, but if he can't do it, Cornelius Lucas can. Yeah. So long as those guys stay healthy, those elements are going to be able to handle this. Now it comes back to the quarterback. I would feel reasonably confident that Joe Flacco can do it. Everybody else, show me. But if those things all happen now, we get into more motion. We get into things being able to be more problematic. And you can hopefully put teams at an advantage and start exploiting them, which, again, creating angles, numbers, and ultimately grass, the three things you want to see if you're a football team, that is where you can now really start creating an advantage and just gashing teams, as opposed to sort of being able to walk up to the line, you're stuck in a static situation, and then you're potentially slamming the ball into a defense who has been planning on how to deal with this all week, and you're not asking them or challenging them to sort of move on the fly. So, I mean, now I'm wishing I covered more of this stuff, but yeah, this is all stuff that is critical, and I think gives you reason to believe that the offense can be better on levels that you never really think about.
Yeah, I mean, you make a really good point, because a lot of people are just like, oh, yeah, use motion. It can be useful for any quarterback, but also a young quarterback, in that you can, if used effectively, you can unwrap, the secondary somewhat, right? You can,
make it easy on the quarterback, or easier. Yeah. And look, if Shador or Dylan Gabriel or Kenny Pickett can do it, then it's going to make their lives infinitely easier in being able to process the offense and set them up for success in a way that maybe you do start seeing a real, a real shot that one of these guys can do it. But that's, again, I couldn't be more dispassionate as far as who wins the job. I don't care. I mean, my preference is one of the younger guys wins it because that is the best case scenario for the team. Yeah. But I'm not married to any of these guys. I don't think the team is either. So I've set my expectations to be they're still going to draft a quarterback this year. But if you can do that stuff, then all of a sudden this whole thing gets so much easier in terms of finding success.
Yeah. Unwrapping the defense, winning with leverage, those types of things, setting your guys up to win with leverage, in motion is just stuff that teams are doing around the league that I just would love to see the Browns be able to do it. But to your point, you got to get ABC basics down first, right? And that's kind of like where they've been.
And like, this was something that Kevin Stefanski and coaches talked about when they were trying to tell people not to pay attention to the reps, even though we all paid attention to the reps for the quarterback position. It is install, it is operation, it is handling the huddle, and all those things matter. And like getting into this whole thing about, well, Shedeur being the guy that most people point to, he's throwing the ball well. That's fine. Colorado never did anything like this, and neither did Oregon. Like, so that's a big ask. Everything has suggested that Kenny Pickett was in a dumb offense. He was arguably in a smarter offense at the college, at the facility he worked at, than the pro team he was working at. So, there's a lot to improve. And again, this is why I talked about that month. I mean, it's not 6 weeks. It's literally, a month of those three quarterbacks in particular trying to get up to speed as much as possible. So when they get up to training camp and they start going, that they can do these type of things. Because if they can't, like I said, if they can, let's throw out Shedeur Sanders. Let's say Shedeur Sanders crushes this next month at the, hopefully at safer speeds than he was the past couple of weeks. But if he's able to internalize the playbook and be able to execute all those things, let's say he's able to operate it sort of like Baker Mayfield was in 2020 when Kevin Stefanski first got here, then he's really got a shot to like make a move up the depth chart. And it's going to be in ways that the layperson's not going to be able to readily see at training camp because they don't know what they're necessarily looking at in that sense,
right.
In that sense, but the coaching staff will.
Yeah. I was talking about this on Friday. Do you think that when they come back, like for me, it's like, okay, we talked about this a lot last week about who was further ahead, in understanding the offense and, verbiage and all that stuff, the vocabulary that comes with it, the wording, all of it, and knowing where to go with the football, all of that stuff. And it was kind of, we had a couple people alluding to the fact that, Shedeur was a little bit behind in that category, just based off of where he played and what offenses he was in college. When they get to training camp, do you think it's just like training wheels off, go, and if you fall flat on your face, you fall flat on your face? Or do you think it's more of like, we're going to just ease them into it as they're appropriately thing? We heard Stefanski's speech, we're teaching you how to practice now. So when you come back, it's less teaching and we're going right from day one of training camp. I just wonder if they come in and, blank slate as far as quarterbacks, you know what I mean? All four of you guys are the three outside of Flacco, and you've had a month since mini camp and go, and let's see where you are now. Or do you think it's still kind of tiered?
I think a lot of that stuff's going to be determined in meetings, and when they get back, and Stefanski, I expect, is going to be in the quarterback room right from the word go, along with Musgrave and Tommy Rees, and they're going to try to get his best to read to be able to put these guys on the board or on tape and be able to say, hey, this is what the play call is. This is what the defense is showing us. What should we be doing here? Those type of things. I think initially there's going to have to be sort of an ease in process. Keep in mind the rookies particularly are going to be there 4 days before the veterans
ahead of time.
So they're going to have a lot of time to sort of really ascertain where they are in terms of the development process. Now, again, I still wouldn't be surprised if there's a slight ease in process because you want to see that they can do it in group, in individual stuff. And obviously there's a limit to sort of what you can do in terms of diagnosing the defense, but it may be as simple as, Joe Flacco's in there with the ones on a given play, and whether it's Gabriel or Shedeur, they're right there with Bill Musgrave or Tommy Reese walking through what should happen and instilling confidence that if they're in there, they can do it. Still, would it shock me if it's like, hey, you're getting 5 reps, make the most of them, and then the next day, if those you nail 4 of those 5 reps, that maybe the next day it's 8 or 9. I mean, that's a really simplistic way to do it, but I think now snaps are going to be increasingly at a premium. The Browns are in a position where, yes, they are trying to develop these guys, but like as much as certain elements of the media don't want to think it like this, they're trying to prepare to win football games. They want to come out and beat the Cincinnati Bengals. They want to come out and beat the Baltimore Ravens to start the year. And they have to be thinking, what's the best way for us to get there, while also trying to balance out, trying to put these guys in a position where hopefully they can step up and make a difference. But they have to, the gauntlet's sort of been set. One, by having 4 quarterbacks, the way they're sort of talking to these guys in meetings and everything, but they are trying to set a standard of, you need to come in and be prepared and ready to go because we don't have time to wait for you. It's not a situation where Tennessee, it's Cam Ward, and they're going to have to live with mistakes he might make. The Browns aren't in that situation necessarily, as much as people may want them to be, because they don't see a future with Joe Flacco. There's that many more guys there. And again, there are any number of people who want to prognosticate the Browns could keep all 4 quarterbacks. I'm not confident that's going to happen.
Right.
I have no idea at this point whether they are going to do that and be fully happy with the idea of keeping 2 inactive every week. That seems like a lot. A trade could come up, whatever. But like, if you're one of these guys, you can't sit there and say to yourself, well, no problem, I'll just be the 4th quarterback. Like, you have to have the mentality of, I can only be sure they're going to keep 3, so I got to make sure I'm one of those 3 guys.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, you're watching the React. Check out Pete's article over at theobr.com about Sampson and how he could be utilized this year in the offense. My name's Brad Ward. Hit that like button. It'll do you some good. It does us some good. Hit subscribe as well as we push towards 10,000 subscribers. All right, we're going to get to our first video. This is 92.3 The Fan, Lance Risland on there, kind of painting a picture of his vision for the Browns offense this year. I thought this was kind of interesting. So we're going to listen to this. Tell me to pause it whenever you want, Pete, here if you need to stop and elaborate on something. And then we're going to get to some collusion and some other things here tonight. Big news day in the NFL, but wanted to hit this while we're on the topic here.
Brian Geltzeiler going to join us. Is it better for the Cavs to get Dylan Gabriel if you're going to start a rookie in week 1? Which I don't think either rookie's going to start. But we'll find out with Lance Risland, who joins us right now. He's a special at Cleveland.com, does a lot of film work for them, former head coach, color analyst, Spectrum News or Spectrum Sports. And he's on the North Homestead Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram hotline. Coach, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
So, Lance, when you look at what's been going on here with these rookies and the conversations we've had over these last few weeks about these rookies, which one, if they were going to start one week 1, which is something Daniel Jeremiah said on Rich Eisen a couple days ago, which rookie would you go with? Which rookie do you think would you go with? And then which rookie do you think they would go with?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Neither are ready to play right now, and I don't think neither of them are very close. However, if I had to pick, I'd pick Dylan Gabriel, and here's why. Dylan Gabriel comes from played at 3 high-level schools, played at Oklahoma, UCF, and then finished out at Oregon. So he's seen a lot of different things, right? So I'm not sure if he's necessarily better, but he has more experience in different things, right? So he's played underneath center. He understands play action. He's, been a part of RPOs. And when you play for all those different coaches, you're learning different ways to read coverages. You're learning how to read fronts. You're learning how to do things. So I think it gives him an advantage just because he's seen a bunch of different things. I think Sanders is going to be very good. However, he's going to have to work on his footwork. Everybody talks about some of the things he's done off the field. For me, it's on the field. He's done a lot of great things. And I think some of his footwork that he needs to work on came from just having just an awful offensive line at Colorado. And when you have that offensive line kind of always being pushed back into you, you kind of learn to drift a little bit. And for me, that's what he's going to work on as he becomes a pro, is learning to step up in the pocket, learning how to move left and right. That's where he lacks right now. It has nothing to do with his talent. He has a lot of talent. He can do a lot of good things, but that footwork is what's holding him back. Dillon Gabriel is very polished. He's very polished with his delivery, and he's very
When he talks about his footwork, Pete, this is kind of right up your alley of expertise, right? So, yeah, we know that he drifts, but like when you're just watching 7-on-7s from mini camp and stuff with him, does it still look like his footwork needs work? Is it or not? Or is it just more of the drifting thing?
No, I can't speak exactly what he's referring to, other than based on what I watched. It's the fact that he faces pressure and wants to move backwards, and the fact that he doesn't always have great answers to how he mock it. He did reference the fact that he doesn't want to step up. He wants to play backwards as opposed to forwards. And I know throughout the draft process, one of the sort of big comparisons people made between Shedeur Sanders and Jackson Dart, when the thought was that those two were sort of competing for, being the quarterback taken after Cam Ward.
Yeah.
The sort of theme with Jackson Dart is playing forward, Shedeur Sanders is playing backward. But if you're just asking me, based on watching him throw without being contested, I think his footwork is good, but it's the other stuff. It's the pocket maneuverability, the stuff that, to his point, trusting the offense, being able to trust your protection. Because when Shedeur Sanders is right with his weight and it's going in the right direction, he looks noticeably better as a passer. He's got more power, not surprising. And then when he's working backwards, he loses all of it. And he looks rather weak. And then he's throwing passes that are like 30 yards, but he's drifting back 15 to 20. So the pass is 10 yards in front of the line of scrimmage against modest, at best, defensive backs, which are likely to get punished in the NFL. He's not. Jordan Love has the physical traits to get away with doing this stuff. Shedeur is not.
Okay.
Polished in what he does and what he sees on the field.
What do the Browns need to do to set those two guys up for success?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think, being down there through the whole part of this summer process, I think the Browns, going back to what my dad always said, you got to get these guys all up to speed to give them a fair chance to fight for the job, right? So if you're right now, Joe Flacco is not getting a ton of work because he knows it. And the reason I think Joe Flacco should be the starter is because he not only does he know the offense, but he allows the rest of his offense to play at a top speed, which is kind of why they've gotten off to such slow starts, is because they're not super physical in practice. Now, what they're doing with these young guys, they had multiple fields going the first time I've seen that in a couple of years, where everybody is getting reps and they're learning this offense. So when they get to camp, they're going to have a realistic shot of trying to, improve their spot on the depth chart. But more importantly, can they compete at the highest level? And that's the one thing that I was been very impressed with Stefanski and his staff, is that these guys all the rookies are getting up to speed. So when live bullets start flying around, they have a chance to be successful.
Why do people talk about rookies starting week 1 for the Cleveland Browns? Is it because of the Browns' reputation? Is it because of lack of any faith in Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett? What is it?
Well, it's funny. The quarterback position, obviously, it's the most important position in sports in terms of like the success of your team, right? Even though it's a team sport, that quarterback has to be really, really good. And I'm not sure why people are pushing for these rookies to start, and because they're not ready. And when these guys are 3rd and 5th round picks, and regardless of the talent or regardless of what you had, like Sanders, for example, for me, Sanders, one of his greatest qualities is his ability to make plays. And that doesn't show up in his arm talent. That doesn't really show up in his footwork or the combine type of stuff, right? He's a gamer. Dylan Gabriel's 5'10", and everybody has asked me, he's under 5'10", he'll never make it. Well, he played at Oklahoma and Oregon and UCF. Those tackles weren't 6 foot there. They were 6'5", 6'6", so he's learned how to manipulate those things. But as rookies, there's very few Daniels out there, right? There's very few guys that can come in and impact right away. Those guys have to come in, and it's really the speed of the game, right? And if your footwork is off just a little bit and you're late in the NFL, that's an interception. So these guys got to play when they're ready. And I've said it before, I'm not sure developmental, we got to take a look at these guys. I'm not really big on that because you have to win games as a coach, because if you're going to develop guys, you won't be around when they're developed, right? So you got to go out and you got to win games. You got to win games now. And right now, for me, that's Joe Flacco, with these guys coming along and continue to work on their skill.
Lance Risland with us on the North Homestead Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram hotline. And as we talk about these rookie quarterbacks, one of the things we talked about earlier in this show was the wide receiver position, what the Browns have there right now. How important is that spot as you talk about developing a rookie quarterback, is who they're throwing to on the outsides?
I'll tell you what, I take a little different stance on this than most. The idea that they drafted both Jungins and Sampson, then they went out and got obviously they got Fannin with Njoku. I think they're very high in Sed Tillman, and I think he was really good at progressing until he got those concussions. Obviously, Jerry Jeudy's a legit number one. So what it tells me is that they're playing to their strengths, right? It tells me that they're playing to that defense. And offensively, it tells me they're going to be in 12 personnel. And that's where I think Kevin Stefanski really shines. And that's why I think he likes guys like Gabriel and Sanders, their ability to process information, because in that 12 personnel, he can kind of dictate what he's going to do to the defense. And he can kind of dictate what personnel they're putting in the game. And I think them not going out and getting another top receiver kind of tells you that they have high hopes in Sed Tillman. Can Woods or Thrash or any of these other guys come along? I think they're banking on one of those guys, but they're saying we're going to control the football. We're going to run the football. We're going to shorten the game. We're going to protect the defense. We're going to end every drive in a kick. And if we can do those things, we can sneak out more games than people think, because offensive line-wise, going back to what they do really well, and that defensive line to me is top 3, top 5 in the NFL with the depth. So I think they're saying, when you see who they drafted and who they didn't draft at receiver, where they're kind of going with this offense, and they're going to be defensively, that's going to be their strength.
What do you say, Coach Lance Risland joining us on the show, what do you say to fans who are like, well, we got to see him by the end of the year or we're wasting the year with either one of these rookies? Because I think that they get to see him, the coaches get to see him in practice every day, but the argument that we need to see him, I don't know, man. We've seen a lot of bad quarterbacks come out as rookies, and they've just stayed bad.
Well, I'm not, once again, though, I'm going to take the coaches, and I know you coach too, Ken. I'm not a big believer in the we got to see these guys. Those guys have to prove that they can play. One of the most overused words in football is the word culture. And culture is not what you say, it's what you do. And if you're going to say, hey, we got to take a look at these guys, you're telling everybody else that winning is not important. You're telling everybody else on that team that, hey, when we go out there, we got to see what everybody can do because we're building to the future. Well, if you're 28, 29, 30 years old, why are you there then? And I think signing Myles Garrett and do the things they're doing, they're showing that they want to win. And as a coach, I like that, right? So if Kevin Stefanski is, they want Kevin Stefanski to develop these guys, then they're saying, then you better let him lose games. Well, I don't know about you, but losing games is never an option in the NFL. So, they have to go out, they have to produce, they have to win, they have to put the best guys out there to win. They got to show that winning is the most important thing. And like I said, culture is not what you say, what you do. And you have to prove to everybody in that locker room and everybody on that staff and everybody in the organization that winning is the most important thing.
You brought up.
It's interesting that I found this interesting. It's interesting that coaches or people that have coached football generally are the ones pointing out that, like, you don't really need to see it. The coaches can see it, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. One, none of this is surprising because he's a coach. All of this sounds like something a coach would say. One, yeah, you got to go out there and win football games. Two, what we've talked about the entire way, the locker room absolutely matters. I disagree slightly on the characterization of saying that the Browns didn't draft a wide receiver because they wanted to lean their strengths. I think that's just how the die was sort of cast in the end.
Yeah.
I think if there was a great receiver that they loved, they would have picked them. Now, having said that, they are able to sort of use this to say, this is who we're going to be. We're going to be a team that runs the ball. We're going to be a team that plays great defense. And we're going to bet on Cedric Tillman. We're going to bet on Jerry Jeudy. And we're going to see if we can't make these other things work around them. But if the Browns didn't make the trade, if the Jacksonville Jaguars didn't make the offer they did, there's every reason to believe that Travis Hunter's on this football team. I mean, It could have been Abdul Carter as well, but Travis Hunter would have been, wide receiver 2 here. So I think it works to sort of like explain ultimately the way they went again. And the Dylan Gabriel pick, or the Dylan Sampson pick, is the one that I sort of really highlight in that regard. Although you can do it with Shedeur as well. Yeah. They just took the guy who was on the best player on their board in that situation. Had it been a wide receiver, I think they would have taken one. But yeah, look, they have to win football games. You're a coach. You're going to go with the guy that's going to help you do that. You're going to get the guy who's going to help you inspire belief. And no, you don't just throw the guys out there. And, as I like to point out, you don't just try shit on Sundays or whatever game day it is.
Yeah.
You got to earn it in practice. You got to show it. You've got to prove to the other guys on the team that you have enough credibility as a player to warrant being out there. Otherwise, the whole thing starts to fall apart. And, then whether or not Jimmy Haslam wants to fire anybody, I think you put yourself in a situation where the locker room is ultimately the one that's going to do you in if you take down a bad path. And you're just talking about this in that regard. Now, the one thing that Lance was not willing to address that I will, why do especially national folks and certainly some local sit there and want to start the rookie? Joe Flacco is not fun at 40 years old. He's not exciting. There's no there's no sizzle factor with Joe Flacco. I want to see the new thing. I want the new story. I want the biggest story. Shedeur Sanders, the last pick of the draft, has been one of the biggest stories on the team. And you're not even hearing Dylan Gabriel should go out there and start week 1. It's almost, let's say, 75% framed from the standpoint of Shedeur. Now, I've said I rated Shedeur higher than Dylan Gabriel. I would have picked Shedeur before Dylan Gabriel. Nevertheless, when we got to the draft and it all played out, Dylan Gabriel 3rd round, Shedeur 5th round. But if you are especially if you are either taking a 30,000 foot look at this team, you're sitting there and you're saying, well, and I do hear this. I've heard this from Anthony Lima on that show. This season doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Let's just focus on trying to see what these young guys can do.
Yeah.
You certainly get more of that for guys who can cover all 32 teams and sort of do a drive-by every week. There's no skin in the game there. There's no investment. You can say, I just want to see what the most interesting thing is. Or I essentially want to fast forward into the next thing. Joe Flacco is not that. He's never going to be that. And for some, Kenny Pickett's never going to be that because he's not interesting in that respect. Shedeur Sanders has a sizzle effect.
Good.
Well, that's also certainly to this point been accurate. Shedeur Sanders, there's the mystery box component in addition to the sizzle element. I don't know why Lance Risland doesn't come out and say that because he knows damn well that's what it is. But
yeah,
that's where that comes down.
Yeah, it's just so it's so interesting. You mentioned Lima saying that all the time because he does. Basically, it talks about the season like it's a foregone conclusion, and a lot of people nationally even do.
The other person I heard do that was Jason Lloyd.
Yep, same
on the same radio show filling in, but it's like Joe Flacco gets you maybe 7 wins or whatever. Listen, Kevin Stefanski could use those 7 wins right now. I think the team could use those 7 wins right now. Even if you don't think this team can make the playoffs, I think this team needs to be able to do that, because at least if you get to 7 wins, unless you it's the last couple weeks of the season and you're 5-10 or 5-10 and you sort of squeak out a couple at the end,
rattling off.
that means you're playing real football at the end of the season, which is what everyone should want. And then you can hopefully parlay that into being good. Now, the counter argument is naturally going to be, well, if they win that many games, then they're going to be out of position with the quarterback. Look, we've done this whole thing where you're like, yes, there's a benefit where when it gets so bad like it did last year, sure, when DTR is going out there in games where you are literally throwing him away, fine, I'm going to root for the defense to play well and long enough until they can't. But ultimately, I don't want to go into this season going, man, I hope this team finishes with the number 1 pick unless it's Jacksonville delivering it. I don't want that for this team. I don't want that for the mentality of what is supposed to be a young core they are building. They need all the success they can get. They need all the earned, Kevin Stefanski talked about earned toughness. I also think this gets back to one of the things that has made Kevin Stefanski sort of be able to endure in Cleveland, as much as some may not want him to. He's gotten pelts. He's gotten real pelts. Like, one of the knocks on, and even when Kevin Stefanski first started here, it was, okay, who did he beat? Well, every year, even last year, he's taking down playoff teams. They won 3 games. 2 of them were against playoff teams. So, I mean, those things matter. And I think they need all that they can get. We're talking about, he's talking about what he thinks could be a top 3-5 defensive line. Yeah, Myles Garrett, hugely important to that. But once you get past Shelby Harris, Isaiah McGuire, he's 24, or he's about to be 24. Mike Hall's 22. Mason Graham's 23. Alex Wright, I think, is 24, 25. Obviously, in the last year, fighting for a contract. They've got Juwan Briggs, who's 24, 25. I don't want these guys to experience 4-13 and say, oh, at least we get a quarterback. No, I want them to be able to come out and say, I want for this team for this season that every quarterback, especially when they come to Cleveland, anywhere really, but especially when they come to Cleveland and they go, maybe we can come out with a victory, but I know I'm not going to have fun. This is going to suck. So I just think there's more to it. So again, I get it from 30,000 feet or drive by. It's weirder when you are here and you have to endure this team every week, and you are potentially going to be in a situation where you have to talk about them every day for those months, and having to endure it if they stink. Get all the wins you can get, man. And I sit here every day watching this whole Bengals mess play out, and they look more and more and more beatable if the Browns can get their own stuff right. I mean, so much of this is, the Browns have to take care of everything they're doing and essentially don't screw up. The Bengals this offseason have done nothing but gone back to their roots of finding the banana peel over and over and over again. And now are putting themselves in a position where, let's say the Browns go out and beat them that first week of the season. And yes, there will be Bengals fans who go, man, they start out slow every year. Yep. But that will be a quick hole. They will not be, and they've got the same tough schedule everybody else does in this division. They're going to sit here and go, we got to get the Browns. So I think that's going to change the mentality. You're going to hear Anthony Lyman, Ken Carman, if the Browns come out and whip up on the Bengals, go Super Bowl, Super Browns, get the win. So I love getting Lance Rylander, those type of guys on those type of programs, because when you just frame it as, I'm a head coach, I'm going to do everything I can to win football games, it makes everything so simple. You get out of this nonsense of trying to twist yourself into pretzels going, well, I'm trying to do this, but I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do this. It makes it so simple. Do what's going to help you win football games, because that's ultimately going to help you do best for what is in the best interest of everybody on that team. Yeah. And certainly, you made the point last week, and it's kind of just stuck with me, is it's kind of crazy to hear all the fans and you hear all the media saying, well, we got to see him. We got to see him. We got to learn about him. We got to see him. Once again,
no, we really don't, because the coaches are seeing them. Now, there's probably like a portion of that evaluation portfolio that has to come under the lights, right? Like the gamer portion of it. But you have to be ready for that first, right? So like, and this idea that, if people just, it doesn't really matter what we see or what we think, it matters what the coaches are seeing in practice, and they will evaluate at their own pace. So it makes you feel less urgent about, like, we got to learn about them, got to find out about them. But, well, they're doing that every day, right? It's just we aren't as much. So I guess it would be the way I would say it.
I mean, in that respect, and this is what the NFL wants. They want to be the ultimate reality show in terms of sports.
Yeah.
They want it to be 365. They are going to do everything. Again, what are we talking about? It used to be 6 weeks. Now it's down to 4. The NFL hates this window with a passion. They're trying to get rid of it. But now it's like an 11th month year, 11 months out of the year, the NFL is on in some form or fashion. If it's a contrived schedule release or whatever the draft has obviously become enormous. I love it, even though I fully acknowledge they're sitting around and picking players. But this is what they want. They want the average fan to feel like I know enough where I can sort of make intelligent decisions on what this team should do, because you have so much access, even though you really are very limited. But look, I'm completely open-minded to seeing what they could do in training camp. I would love one of these guys to seize the job over the course of those months before the season or during the season. I just think people underestimate how much there is to make these things happen, and Lance Ryan sort of referenced it, how rare the Jaden Daniels phenomenon is.
Yeah.
And we'll see, would it be a huge shock if he has a sophomore slump the way that CJ Stroud stepped back in year 2?
Not at
it
all.
would not. But to be determined. The Browns obviously need to find their guy. But if one of these guys isn't going to proclaim themselves that pretty quickly, then you're probably looking at hopefully getting that guy in next year's draft.
Before we move on to the collusion portion of the program, I haven't talked to you about this. Did you have any thoughts on the whole speeding thing with Shedeur?
I wrote about it from the standpoint of, I'm not going to sit here and characterize Shedeur Sanders as good, bad, or otherwise based on speeding tickets. I'm not here to get worked up over them. I just looked at it from the practicality of, it's a 4-man race. If Shedeur is better than everybody else, he's going to start, he's going to play, or he's going to ensure himself a roster spot, and he's going to start if he's the best guy. If he puts himself in a situation where he's potentially the 4th guy or in the running for the 4th guy, maybe you get into a situation where the organization sits here and goes, can we trust him? And I suppose the speeding is stupid enough or irresponsible enough. I mean, especially when you contrast that against what just happened with Kirk Barton, which is incredibly heartbreaking. He got into a wreck that killed somebody. That is sort of the way this could have gone for Shedeur Sanders. I mean, I know some people have made the comparison to Henry Ruggs. Nobody got hurt. It's reckless and stupid, but it certainly happens. But if you now put yourself in a situation where you are potentially on the cutting line, and they go, well, we can trust the other guy to be here on time, to take care of his business, to not embarrass the franchise. Given the investment, it's small. I think it's $447,000 if they were to cut him outright. Don't put yourself in a position where could be the determining factor. So
I can't imagine that would ever be the determining factor, though.
As I said, it only comes into play if you find yourself in a situation where he's tied or in a close enough battle for that 3rd spot, and they're like, we don't want to carry 4 guys. There's no trade here. And hell, they may not be sure that they can't get him on the practice squad in that case. I know a lot of people, oh, there's no way. And then we do this every year. And then all the guys end up on the practice squad. Regardless, all I'm saying is don't put yourself in that position. And then the other part about this is like it opens the door for people who didn't like Shedeur already to say all the things. He's entitled. This is why he fell to the fifth round. That was supposed to humble him. He didn't learn anything from it. I don't know the kid enough to know how he feels. The only thing I will say, and it wasn't really his fault, I thought the little clip of the softball thing made him look childish in a way that was sort of out of his control. I don't know who he was with on that clip that sort of said like he learned his lesson or some crap. I hope so because I don't want his career to be sort of, talked about in terms of distraction. But again, I'm not going to get worked up over what amount to be speeding tickets. But you do have to contrast that against the possibility that, hey, if this goes a different way, he either kills himself or somebody else, because that's when that could easily happen at that speed. That's where you sort of look at it. And unfortunately for him, I don't know how many people are paying attention to the Kirk Barton thing or not, but if you're an Ohio State fan, you remember Kirk Barton and all the stuff he's gone through his life. Yeah. To then sort of have that right there as the opposite situation where Sanders gets pulled over. Fortunately, I know Bomani Jones did a whole thing on this, which is kind of interesting, where he said, fortunately it was the cops that stopped him as opposed to an ambulance or that type of thing. So nobody got hurt. Fortunately, hopefully he learns from it. My last sort of thought on this was his timing couldn't have been worse, just from a standpoint of there's nothing else going on. So yeah. That's what people are going to talk about. But, my hope is that we've long forgotten about this by the time he gets to training camp. And it's, then again, somebody's going to ask him. So I guess we have to be prepared for that element as well.
Yeah, well, I hope not. A week from now, I mean, 2 weeks from now, I doubt anybody's talking about it anymore. And ultimately, if he comes into camp and plays well, we won't talk about this either, unless it happens again.
No, that was my point. Is ultimately if he comes and plays well, and we're not talking, this doesn't keep coming up or something, it's going to be forgotten faster than Myles Garrett, the angst that Myles Garrett's contract holdout, which is all but gone.
All right. So big news day in the NFL. I didn't know what Florio was referencing when he said big day, news day in the NFL. But, so basically, they got their hands on Florio and what's the other guy's name?
Pablo Torre, who's, by the way, right now, Torre, like absolutely dominating as a journalist. Even he's covering some stories there are plenty of people who don't care about, notably the Bill Belichick element. Yes. But he's been on a heater in terms of getting to the bottom of these stories, and he absolutely crushed it on this.
Yeah, they basically kind of mini challenge each other to see who could get their hands on this first, and Pablo was able to get his hand on a 61-page. It was the case. Basically, it was adjudicated, right? It was in front of a the word's escaping me. A private guy they hire, and they basically got their hands on all the text messages, all the goings on that had to do with the collusion case brought by the NFL union against the NFL for colluding against their players in guaranteed contracts. So I have some timestamps here because it's a really long video. It is Pablo and it is Florio. They do a very good job in this video. We'll kind of skip through it. There's some damning stuff against JC Treader in here. Not looking good. in this one, but we're gonna just take a quick peek at it and talk on it. Arbitrator, thank you, Fumble, very much. It was private arbitrator, that they both have to agree upon, which also plays into this as well as they kind of break this down. So it's very interesting stuff. If you remember the oddness of the whole Lamar Jackson situation, when he was tagged and to the non fully guaranteed tag, or the non franchise tender, the full one, and no teams came forward for the two-time MVP, right? Like to try to get him, when it seemed fully fair game that a team would make an effort to try to sign him at that point, especially with the way him and the Ravens, where they were at in negotiations. So here we go. We'll jump forward here a little bit.
Torre finds out I am Pablo Torre, and today
collusion grievance that was filed under the auspices of Article 7, where the NFLPA is all of the general managers, all of the owners, executives with the teams, executives with the league, media is there, agents are there.
making it kind of like an Illuminati gathering that also has limited press availability, which is how a Ravens beat reporter who was there to cover the looming Lamar Jackson negotiations got a quote from the team's owner, Steve Bisciotti, about the Watson trade that had just gone down literal days before. And that quote promptly got read on the local news.
It's like, damn, I wish they hadn't guaranteed the whole contract. I don't know that he should have been the first guy to get a fully guaranteed contract. To me, that's something that is groundbreaking, and it'll make negotiations harder with others, including Lamar Jackson. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to play the game, you know?
Hold up. Is that Dave Bacon? That has to be Dave Bacon.
It is, because it's courtesy of Sports for CLE.
Oh, I didn't even see it up there. I was like, holy crap.
We shall see.
But what I didn't know until reading this 61-page document is that the very same day that Steve Bisciotti gave that quote in Palm Beach, he had also attended a presentation. A secret slideshow presentation from a shadowy but extremely important organization known as the NFLMC.
The NFLMC is the NFL Management Council, and that is the group that ostensibly provides advice and suggestions to the 32 teams on how to potentially weather these storms, whether they be temporary or permanent shifts in the way business is being done. But at all times, they emphasize it's up to the individual teams to make their own decisions. That's what they say. Now, Pablo, I've been doing this 25 years now. And the unmistakable vibe that I have picked up over the years is what the Management Council says goes. And when they give you a suggestion, they're not really giving you a suggestion. They're telling you this is how business gets done.
And what the expedited discovery would reveal here is that after the Deshaun Watson deal was signed, Commissioner Roger Goodell himself began emailing his general counsel, Jeff Pash, about specific notes that the NFLMC's 45-minute presentation to all 32 owners should make sure to hit. I just want to take you inside the room here for a second, if you can imagine it, because imagine you're going into a presentation. Your bosses, in some regard, the people who are at the front of the room, have slides. There's a PowerPoint deck. And these notes that have been massaged and edited and deliberated upon by Roger Goodell and his general counsel, that have been written into the slides themselves, are the things that they would like the presenters to verbally relay. For instance, slide 17, quote, "If guarantees continue to grow in both amount and number of players, then there's a risk that they become the norm in contracts, regardless of player quality. That not only has the potential to hinder roster management, but set a market standard that will be difficult to walk back. Of course, all clubs must make their own decisions, but continuing these trends can handcuff a club in the future. End quote.
What we're seeing is the effort to send a very clear message to the 32 teams as to how the NFL, through the NFL Management Council, wants business to be done. When you do a 5-year, $230 million fully guaranteed contract, that's the canary in the coal mine. That's the threat to upend indirectly. The thing that the NFL has been holding the line on in CBA talks, oh, wait a minute. We've fought them off in their effort to get fully guaranteed contracts, and they're just giving it away. We can't have that. And that, I think, is the gist of an attempt by the league to engineer a collusive arrangement among the 32 teams by saying to them, hey, guys, you better stop this or we're going to have a problem.
And now, by the way, we mention that Robert Kraft, owner of the Patriots, who's a member of the NFLMC's executive council, he was asked about this by the investigators, and Kraft testified, quote, he did not recall talking about the growth of signing bonuses and guarantees at the owners' meeting. End quote.
I do not recall.
Falcons owner Arthur Blank testified that he did hear it, but that, quote, hearing the presentation did not cause him to reduce guarantees for his team, end quote. Meanwhile, John Mara, the owner of the Giants, testified, quote, just the thought of me calling Jerry Jones or somebody and asking him not to guarantee Dak Prescott's contract or somebody else's contract, he would laugh at me. Among other choice words, I'm sure. Just the whole notion is ridiculous. And the thought that I'm going to be influenced by what another owner is saying to me is just absurd. End quote.
If you look at John Mara's quote, and he has been the president of the NFL.
All right. So basically, in these findings, right, they found the NFL, they could have found them guilty or whatever, sided with the NFLPA, and there would have been an astronomical amount of money that they would have been won, right? They did not find against the NFL. However, the quote is after the NFL won, the NFL lost, as Droney, who was the arbitrator, wrote at pages 55 and 56. There is little question the NFL Management Council, with the blessing of the commissioner, encouraged the 32 NFL clubs to reduce guarantees in veterans' contracts at the March 2022 annual owners meetings. In other words, the NFL wanted its member teams to collude. There's more proof of this later, which we can go to, but just hearing that stuff there, what are your thoughts so far?
Up to this point, and when I was watching this, it helps to fill in a lot of the holes when you get into the whole Lamar Jackson thing in particular. It helps to explain why things played out the way they did. But up until this point, it's all awfully circumstantial. It's not until later where you go, there it is, where you sit there and go, okay, there's a lot of plausible deniability until you get here. And then the game's sort of up.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So this is interesting here. This is the part about J.C. Treader, a little quid pro quo action that he was in on. We'll get through this part real quick, and then we'll get to some of the more damning stuff that was discovered. I don't want to spend too long on this, but 3530, I think, is where we want. Let's try this.
On the books, because, of course, he couldn't be the president anymore. What Lloyd Howell did was create an executive level job that had never existed before.
All right, so
Development.
We'll go
and
back a little bit.
It does make you wonder if, as part of the vetting process, they were even aware of it, if it changed anything, if they properly went down the rabbit hole, reviewed the complaint, where
in history. End quote. This was a $377 million settlement in order to resolve a set of explosive financial allegations that were brought on by a whistleblower at Booz Allen.
Booz Allen works almost exclusively with the U.S. government. They have a ton of contracts with Department of Defense.
She says she quickly realized the company's other contracts, some with foreign governments like Saudi Arabia, were bleeding cash.
And in order to keep the company profitable, they were passing those costs onto the U.S. government contracts.
So these private contracts, including with foreign governments, are losing money. And to cover those losses, they're taking money from the American taxpayer.
That's right.
And it was a lot of money.
What I discovered while I was there was that they were overcharging the government by nearly $100 million a year.
That's when Feinberg says she began a...
And so this whistleblowing Booz Allen employee, who happens to be a principled former Marine named Sarah Feinberg, what she did was go right to her bosses to warn them about this financial and legal and ethical disaster.
Feinberg started by telling the group that fixing the issue would mean losing money. But she says she was quickly cut off by the chief financial officer who told her,
I appreciate all the work you've done on this. We are not going to make it a priority this year.
that must have just been devastating for you.
It was very devastating for me. I called my husband right afterwards and told him I was quitting my job.
And the thing you should know here, Mike, according to an unsealed copy of Sarah Feinberg's civil complaint that we here at Publitory Finds Out have obtained, is that the CFO who she referenced there, who caused Sarah Feinberg to quit her job in protest and officially register as a whistleblower with the U.S. government, just happened to be J.C. Tretter's excellent new ED, Lloyd Howell.
An unbelievable development. And it does make you wonder if, as part of the vetting process, they were even aware of it, if it changed anything, if they properly went down the rabbit hole, reviewed the complaint where Lloyd Howell is directly implicated in communications with the plaintiff. Yes, how much did they know? How much did they bother to uncover? And how much were they bothered by any of this? And how much of it did they share? After they had pre-vetted the candidates and submitted them to the Board of Player Representatives simply for interview and selection.
Yes, J.C. Tretter touting over and over again how much time, 570 hours they spent vetting. This did not, apparently, make a difference if they knew about it. But what Lloyd Howell proceeded to do after getting elected to that job, the executive director of the NFLPA, was somehow even more eyebrow-raising now given this context, Mike. Because he didn't merely give a contract to an extremely ambitious and very strategic and now officially retired Browns offensive lineman who couldn't otherwise get paid to work for the union on the books because, of course, he couldn't be the president anymore. What Lloyd Howell did was create an executive-level job that had never existed before in the history of this union. And the title was Chief Strategy Officer. And I don't know if people are ready for this reveal, but the person he gave it to, Mike, was J.C. Tretter.
When I...
All right. So they don't mention this on here, but does it strike you as wildly ironic that the invented position is Chief Strategy Officer, Paul DePodesta's position? Like, I don't know. It's just kind of funny. Like,
oh, I assume that was where the idea came from.
that's what I thought. That's immediately where my brain went. Like, that's a good title, right?
Yes.
So basically, Tretter brought this guy in to get him to rehire him back in because he couldn't be president anymore, is the idea here, right? There's clear quid pro quo. It feels like they have evidence of here, correct?
It certainly suggests that J.C. Tretter's ultimate ambition is to take over DeMaurice Smith's job. And this is sort of the way that allows him to stay in the game to do that. I would imagine that J.C. Tretter's argument would be, and it does seem like they sidestepped a lot of processes or maybe put the thumb on the scale to make sure this happened. But I imagine J.C. Tretter, and I don't think he's entirely wrong, would argue that he's the best potential advocate for the players, this whole fiasco aside.
I guess, but in the end, they kind of present the question like, why wasn't the players union screaming from the mountaintops this entire time about this thing? Like, and he kind of has to answer for that, right? Like, why wasn't there more exposure to any of this, despite them not being found against in the adjudication? They didn't really bring any of this to light in the public, and they could have. The players union.
It's not entirely clear if this is because, they talk about it. If I don't buy the idea that this was because Treader insulted Russell Wilson. I don't buy that argument. What, where I have a difficult time getting to is, or maybe it's the fact that by if he helped allegedly cover this whole thing up, that helped ease his way in ensuring that he could put his guy in power and allow himself to get that job. I don't know if there's enough to necessarily definitively get that. That's why I'm going to say allegedly. But I understand why anyone who would sort of casually look at this situation goes, J.C. Treader may have helped bury this to ensure that he was able to sort of help out J.C. Treader.
Yeah, that's where I was going with it. Absolutely. All right, now this gets to the now there's they mention in here that this has impacted over 600 players. I don't know if that's true. That's a claim you can make. I don't know if that's necessarily true. How if the guaranteed money would have changed on anybody else but like the big three here. You know what I mean? That they're going to get to 600 players. I don't know if the negotiations change at all there, but there were three that mattered the most, right? So, and they're going to get to those right here.
Set during the fire dog session in March of 2022 was being acted upon.
And the arbitrator in this case seemed to believe that litany of excuses that was documented in this 61-page file. And he also, therefore, ruled in favor with Steve Bisciotti, the Ravens owner, who I'll remind you had a bit of publicly volunteered insight.
Damn, I wish they hadn't guaranteed the whole contract.
But this is where I should just jump in to point out why a certain cynicism about not only Steve Bisciotti's quote there, but also arbitration's overall incentive structure is also warranted here, in general.
And this is all negotiated in the CBA. Article 15 sets forth the various rules that apply to the selection and retention of the system arbitrator, and that's what Christopher Droney's role was.
And that role, by the way, is one person's job. The kind where there's a press release announcing that Christopher Droney, this noted retired federal judge, has been hired by the NFL and approved by the NFLPA to make a ruling on their disputes.
The way it works, there's a term that's served by the arbitrator, and either side at any point can say, once this term is up, that person is out. And I hate to be this cynical, but this is the way the world works. If you're in a situation where either side can pull the plug on your job, part of your assessment, beyond the facts of the case, it's the dynamics. Who wants to win this more? Who wants to win more? And if you get the impression the union isn't nearly as zealous about this because there's been a change in executive director, but the owners are extremely intent on this, that can be just one of those factors and cause you to pick a path of least resistance and maximum security in this position that he presumably hopes to keep.
And so a through line through this entire story, in the writing of player contracts and in the system of arbitration and in the operations of both the union and the league, is incentives. What is everyone incentivized to care about the most, and why? Which is all to say that, as you may recall, at least one NFL owner, Arthur Blank, owner of the Falcons, chose to keep a player named Desmond Ridder, a quarterback who currently isn't even in the league, instead of calling Lamar Jackson's purportedly busted phone and making an MVP an offer. Kyler Murray. Okay, I want to move to him now because in March of 2022, after the Deshaun Watson contract was fully guaranteed, Kyler's agent, Eric Burkhart, sent a new proposal to the Arizona Cardinals, Mike. According to the document, quote, a fully guaranteed contract was very important to both him and Mr. Murray, and Mr. Burkhart believed Mr. Murray was better and more deserving than Mr. Watson, end quote. But after the Watson contract news and before the March 2022 owners meeting we've been talking about endlessly now, the owner of the Cardinals, Michael Bidwill, he shows up in the story because he had already texted his general manager about Kyler's contract saying, quote, we are going to load up this contract with so many incentives to earn the real money, end quote. And in July of 2022, after the Cardinals did exactly that, a brief but unforgettable private text exchange between Michael Bidwill and the owner of the Los Angeles Chargers, Dean Spanos, took place, according to the document. And Mike, I would just like us to read this exchange together. Let's do a table read of this, Florio, because I need you to play the role of Chargers owner Dean Spanos. And
This is the most damning for me, right?
Well, yes, but I don't want to skip over the other part, which I think is still, this is certainly what I would consider the smoking gun. The Falcons thing is still the biggest deal to me.
Insane.
If you are a Falcons fan, I don't know how this doesn't fundamentally change your relationship as a fan with this team.
Yes.
Your owner had an opportunity to go make a play for Lamar Jackson, who, beyond the fact he's a multiple-time MVP, would have been the dream get for the city of Atlanta from a fan standpoint, and immediately launched you into being a championship contender, all those things. And in a league where everybody wants to talk about we're committed to winning, we're committing to doing everything we can to chase a championship, Arthur Blank sat there and said, no, I don't. I'm going to prioritize, one, my own bottom line, and two, I want to make sure to fight for solidarity of the collective ownership of the league.
Yeah.
That to me has to be gobsmacking if you're an Atlanta Falcons fan. And yes, you might sit here now and go, well, we're really excited about Michael Penix. You're the Atlanta Falcons. You are you're what ifing this forever. In the same way the Browns fans are what if the Browns didn't trade for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
If you're the Falcons, you're a Falcons fan, you are forever. The biggest what if in franchise history will always be, what if we actually made a real effort to get to Lamar Jackson, who at that point wanted no part of the Ravens, and everybody in Baltimore thought he was leaving. Now it doesn't stop there.
Called him. Yeah.
Doesn't stop there, because if you're a Browns fan, a Bengals fan, or a Steelers fan, you are potentially close to seeing Lamar Jackson not just leave your division, but leave the conference.
Yep.
And everybody would be sitting there going, okay, not only is there a now two-time MVP that's not in our division, what the hell are the Ravens doing at quarterback?
Yep.
So, one, I hate the Ravens for any number of reasons, but this is one of them. They have constantly enjoyed favored nation status in the league. And this is another example where they just get preferential treatment. Now, in this case, it's entirely a matter of the Falcons, or anyone else, but specifically the Falcons, saying, no, we're cool with Desmond Ridder as the quarterback. Like, if you're dealing with the Browns, every so often you'll get this nonsense of like fans going, we should file a class action lawsuit because the team is so bad. And no, you don't have any grounds to do that even if you're a Falcons fan. But I'll be curious to see if we start hearing some more of that stuff. Or if we start seeing, articles, videos, whatever, basically saying Arthur Blank can't be trusted to own this team anymore. Obviously he can't do anything. They can't make him sell the team, but like, how can you ever sit there and believe that he's going to operate in the best interest of the team. He had the ultimate example to do that. And here's the thing. There are a whole lot of people that don't like Jimmy Haslam, and for every reason not to. Jimmy Haslam, if let's say the Browns lost Deshaun Watson to another team, and granted it would have been in the division, all these other things, Jimmy Haslam's picking up the phone and calling Lamar Jackson, or he's allowing Andrew Berry to do that. That to me is gobsmacking. And you're the Falcons. You've been to the Super Bowl. You've never won a Super Bowl. And then what happens? You obviously are awful with Desmond Ridder. You signed Kirk Cousins to that god-awful contract. And yes, Michael Penix, maybe he's going to be good. But God help that team if Michael Penix gets hurt or stinks. Everybody's going down in some form or fashion. But you are going to watch that city and that fan base burn Arthur Blank to the ground over this situation. And what's the counter argument? I mean, there isn't one. You play to win the games, according to Herm Edwards, and he basically just tapped and said, "No, I'm acting in the best interest of my financial interests and the bottom line of the league." That is the part of this where I sit here and I just can't believe it. The Dean Spanos Bidwell thing.
Yeah.
Not only is that part predictable, but the fact that those two owners were involved in that text thread.
Yeah.
Entirely predictable because they're both cheap. Bidwell's not a great owner, and Spanos is a renter in the Rams stadium presently after not being willing to play ball for a stadium because he wanted to be basically subsidized the whole way. So now he's a renter and clearly second fiddle in that stadium to the Rams. And yes, you have Justin Herbert, you've got all these things in Jim Harbaugh, but there's just not the same fervor. Their fans are still in San Diego. Not to say that nobody in Los Angeles likes the Chargers, but it's just not their town. So, and Mike Brown's too old to text. So that's the other one that would have made sense. So those two being involved in this particular text change is damning. If you're going to say what's the smoking gun, it's that.
Yeah.
But the Arthur Blank thing, for people who sat there and went through the whole thing with Lamar Jackson and the argument about, well, maybe his body will break down. Okay. But Desmond Ridder.
Dude, that whole thing. Okay. So revisionist going back, at the time I think we were all thinking how weird it was that there was no market for him. Right. In that situation, but in looking at it now, it's almost like the audacity of the Ravens to just operate in such a manner that left them open to it, knowing that no one would act on it. Not one person called him. That's the amazing thing, right? That's insane.
Yes, at the time, and this is why I was never worried about Myles Garrett. Bisciotti, the team's owner, basically called Lamar Jackson a child and said something along the lines of, when he finishes cleaning his room, we'll negotiate his contract or something super demeaning. But it's just incredible. And one of the arguments that was used to say, to explain this whole thing away, is nobody wanted to negotiate the contract for the Ravens, which, again, flimsy, especially if your quarterback is Desmond Ridder. So when you were sitting there as a Browns, Bengals, or Steelers fan sitting there going, oh, man, this is the opportunity to get him out of the division, and this whole thing plays out. And then, Arthur Blank just turns it down. That's the other compelling sort of what if about this. And that's the other part I'm very curious to see. Look, if you want my overall what's going to happen with this, almost nothing. Almost nothing's going to come out of this.
Mm-hmm.
The NFLPA is a weak union. They may try to use it as a leverage play in the upcoming CBA. Maybe they'll get something for it. Maybe they won't. Most people won't care. Agents, by and large, here's the thing with agents. They are more than happy with the current structure because they get to, because if you are, yes, there's a benefit to being able to negotiate a 5-year contract that's all guaranteed and everything and the money that comes with that. But if you're an agent, you're way happier doing a contract where every 2 or 3 years you're renegotiating and then re-upping you're reestablishing where that market goes because you're getting a higher payout. If you get, if your player gets hurt, you still already got paid. So there's not a huge incentive for you to get angry and go, oh my God, this is awful, because there's still a structure in place that allows you to make as much money as possible. In fact, had the NFL gone to fully guaranteed contracts, and again, keep in mind with Lamar's situation, he doesn't have an agent.
Right.
He negotiated himself. So if he was able to get himself a fully guaranteed contract without an agent, it wouldn't have eliminated agents entirely, by no means, but it would have taken away some of their strength.
Yeah.
It would have hurt them, yes.
Yeah.
Now, where could this matter? One, how does Lamar Jackson feel about this whole thing when he finds out?
Yep.
Because he may immediately go in after and go, I want to redo my deal again.
Yeah, he
that likely. I don't know. But again, he doesn't have an agent, so he could sit there. I'm holding out and go, I'm getting my money. I don't know. The more compelling story that's going to come out of this, and Mike Florio, for all the things I disagree with Mike Florio on, which is about 75% of the time.
Yeah,
he's right. ESPN's not going to touch this story because ESPN is partners with the league. There are a whole bunch of other places that are never going to touch this story because they have vested interest in the league. That's going to be what I'm going to keep an eye on. How far does this story go? And, it's rumored to be potentially buying the NFL Network. You're never going to hear a word from them.
Yeah.
Are some of these other networks going to fill in the gap, or are they going to feel, or is the NFL going to quickly, let's say CBS Sports or Fox or somebody else wants to cover this, or NBC or anyone else, and then the NFL goes, well, man, I don't know about your stream. I don't know about your broadcast rights next time around.
Yeah.
Are they going to use their power? Are we going to see, YouTube's going to have the hardest time sort of getting, sort of hiding this.
Yeah.
If they go and let's say not only demonetize, but just delete this video off and Pablo's video and all these other videos, you're going to notice. So I don't think they have a whole lot of ability to do that, but who's going to carry this story? Who's going to talk about it? And here, the other part about this, timing is everything. It's not random that they released this on June 24th. I don't know when they got the story and got this whole thing together and everything. They weren't releasing this during OTAs.
Right.
They weren't releasing this when there was football stuff to be talked about. ESPN is going to open up tomorrow and talk about Dak Prescott's legacy.
Yep.
For 17 hours.
Yep.
They will do everything in their power. They're filling in a dead sports time and coming up with some of the most ridiculous topics to talk about for the umpteenth time.
Yeah.
And it's going to look bad, as these guys well know, that they are avoiding this topic, and people are going to notice that they're avoiding this topic. So that's more the thing where I'm going to see, where does this thing go? The JC Treader thing, maybe it matters. Maybe there's players who get upset. I don't know how much can be done. And it's not impossible to sort of unravel him. And sort of take him down in some form or fashion. I just don't know. The union is just so weak, and players' careers are so finite that they may not be all that worried about it, that they have other fish to fry and this sort of thing. So Maybe there's an initial anger and outrage with the players involved because so much pressure was put on Russell Wilson, which is why J.C. Tretter was, visibly angry because he thought he was selling out all the players by taking the deal he did instead of fighting for the guaranteed contract. And then you see the Kyler Murray thing. And then, you cut this off before we got to the Justin Herbert thing. He was the third guy. And then the precedent was gone. It was over. And we moved on from the concept of, and Lamar Jackson was sort of final nail in the coffin. We moved on from this concept of, then it became Deshaun Watson was a one-off.
Which is what they wanted.
Yes, which is they wanted to make sure this was never going to happen. So yeah, I think it's a great story. Again, I do think there's some elements that are still somewhat circumstantial, but they've got enough that I'm convinced that this was done. This was done with intent. This was done with strategy to make sure that they were never going to put themselves in this position where they were going to get stuck with guaranteed contracts. So that stuff makes sense. Does the average consumer care? No, ultimately they're going to watch on Sunday and see what happens. So there's only so far that, and more than often than not, for all the people who want to sort of be pro labor and pro player, they are until it hurts their team. Myles Garrett being the ultimate example. There were plenty of people for a while who were like, yeah, I hope Myles Garrett gets traded, and Myles Garrett deserves to go to a winner, and Myles Garrett deserves that, and the other thing. And then it lingers around a little while, and all of a sudden you're sitting there going, it's my team. I want my team to be successful. I want to get this done. I want him to be on the team, and I want to win. I see the same. I'll use the Bengals as an example. The amount of people fighting for Mike Brown in the Shamar Stewart thing, or even Trey Hendrickson, which is even like if you could build the organization out of Trey Hendrickson, you would, and they're still treating him like crap. And yet there are still in that fan base who will defend the ownership from paying him what he richly deserves. So like there's a limited patience for how long people are really, really, really going to be pro player. And ultimately they sort of sit there and go, well, there's a salary cap and I want my team to win.
Yeah. I guess, your point about their union being weak is so true. But like, I guess my thing would be like, the one thing that could come from this is like, why wasn't a light shined on this? Why wasn't there more noise made about any of this? Why was it so hush hush till now? And now that this is out there and they can actually dig into the texts and emails and all the little stuff, like somebody should do an investigation from the union side. Like who was behaving in good faith for the players here and who wasn't, like, because we need to do a cleaning of house for everyone that wasn't, right? Like it feels so scummy and corrupt, at all levels, but it feels like that bleeds over to the player side as well here somewhat.
Yeah. Well, without getting too political, this is why certain people don't like collective bargaining and unions.
Yeah.
Because this is the part where, this is the example you point to and you go, well, it's corrupt and union leadership's no better than the other guys. So I should go out on my own. Whether or not you want to agree with that is up to you, but that is where that sort of, you end up in this weird spot. And, using Pablo's logic, this is how I look at most everything is through incentives. Ultimately, J.C. Tretter has an incentive to look out for J.C. Tretter, even if J.C. Tretter believes and might be right in saying that he's ultimately the best person to sort of represent the players. If he did and sort of engineer this thing and willingly sacrifice this battle for his own sake, how many political careers, I don't care what side of the aisle are, where you can sit here and you go, oh, that's pretty grimy. So yeah, I mean, that's sort of where you end up.
Yeah. Not even just him. I mean, I'm sure it goes layers deeper than that, right? Like
Yes, it's just he happens to be the name that's being attached.
The figurehead, yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm
like
just saying,
I agree with your point. It's just like to what Pablo and Florio were talking about. They never mentioned anybody else's name other than
right.
him and the dude he essentially hired.
And I'm just saying, like, to your point, that when the next CBA negotiation comes up, like, this should be a focal point. They should be able to gain some leverage out of it. Can they turn something into that? You know what I mean? Like, it can't just go away if you're the players union, right? Like, all of this crap. Like, you need to be able to manufacture something out of this, because it's nonsense. All right, I'm gonna let them do this little table read thing, and then we'll stop it, because this is them acting out the two owners' text thread, I believe.
I'll be Cardinals owner Michael Bidwill, if you please.
Congratulations on signing Murray.
Thanks, Dino. These QB deals are expensive, but we limited the fully guaranteed money and have some pretty good language. Thankfully, we have a QB that's worth paying.
Your deal helps us for our quarterback next year.
I think many teams will be happy with it once they have a chance to review. Cleveland really screwed things up, but I was resolved to keep the guaranteed relatively, quote, low, unquote.
That's like, come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, if you were trying to write the thing not to say, Michael Bidwell said it.
They did the opposite. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Crazy stuff, man. Crazy. I mean, like, if you haven't watched the whole thing, I would and you're interested in this.
Look, I think Pablo Torre finds out is phenomenal in general.
Yeah.
He can take what seems like a relatively benign story and make it drag you in and make it really interesting. Like, I'll use an example. He had an episode that makes no sense, but nevertheless, for people who were around for, you know, the Bulls the last championship, the final season,
The Last Dance,
and then how that coincided with the Monday Night Wars of wrestling between WWE and WCW at that point, and how Dennis Rodman and Karl Malone both participated in the finals, and yet his theory, his argument, which is really compelling, and I frankly buy into, makes the argument that the entire finals, trying to play for an NBA championship, they were trying to sell the upcoming pay-per-view event, what was going to be Bash at the Beach for that year. And it's awesome. And he breaks it down with video and all this other stuff, and stuff he accused of being fake and not real and all this other stuff, entirely for the sake of selling this match between, you know, Karl Malone and Diamond Dallas Page, with Dennis Rodman. I think it was Hollywood Hulk Hogan. And you don't have to care about any of this stuff, but the way that Pablo Torre does a great job presenting these things.
That's insane, though.
And yes, like, this thing makes no sense, but it's awesome.
Did the basketball players actually participate in the wrestling?
Yes, that's why they were doing this whole thing, because they were in the match.
That's insane. Wow. I'll have to check that out. All right, good stuff. As usual, you're watching the React. Hit that like button. See if it does something different tonight. I don't think it will, but you can hit it, and it helps us out a ton. So hit it and see what happens. Also, just make sure you're subscribed here as we push towards 10,000 subscribers at the OBR streaming network. That's Pete Smith, and my name is Brad Ward. We're going to wrap up here in a couple of minutes because Garage Beers is next. But as usual, I want to get to the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show as they take on Shedeur Sanders props for a second here. This is fun. I must confess, I have not engaged in all of this, so this should be an adventure. Rodzilla, that's right, Jeff Tucker.
12:30. So let's talk a little Shedeur Sanders, guys, after a quick word from football and baseball. Let's spend a few minutes here on football. We found some prop bets on the interweb this weekend regarding the Browns rookie quarterback. I'm going to give you guys the prop bet. You tell me if you take the bet. If not, what would the odds have to be for you to take the bet? Are you guys ready?
Let's do it.
We got 3 of them. Prop bet number 1. Shador Sanders to have more than 300 passing yards in a single game this season. The odds, -140.
Yeah, no.
All right. First of all, -140 is crazy.
No, that's
right.
stupid. That's just a sucker bet.
Like, what the hell? Don't you think? I would have thought it would have been more like +200.
No, because
No?
they're going to get all those Colorado super fans who think he's going to be the greatest quarterback ever right out the rip, and it's going to be just like it was at Colorado, and he's going to throw for 1 million yards.
Exactly, which is why they would have you make it a plus money bet. They'll all pile on it. They'll rake in the cash.
Take the juice on that or no?
No, that's a high bar.
Yeah,
Very few do
Not a high
go
bar,
over
so
300
much
in a
as
game
it-
anymore.
I mean,
Look at the Browns' offense. I don't believe
that's-
necessarily that anyone's going to be if their offense, unless the Browns have an unexpected passing surge, they're going to try shorten football games and see a lot of 225 type games, whether they
Right.
ever get to Shador or not.
I would say, listen, I would consider this bet as a betting man, but the price is this is a terrible price to take this at. There's no way I'm taking this unless it's plus money. Probably like plus 300. But like this and them saying that like okay, and it's not even that the 300 yards is unfathomable, because I think he will play at some point this year, and it could be like week 16 in a game that doesn't matter or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, and
Sure,
throw for 300 yards. It's very possible, but -140 is a bad price.
I'm not sure you won't get those same odds if you know he's going to start.
Sure, you're right. Yeah.
Like the day of the game. Like that's
That-
the thing. The odds suck.
Yeah,
means it's more likely than not to happen. First of all, he has to play. We don't know for sure he's going to play this year.
Right. I mean, I feel pretty good that he's going to play. You would take a bet that he's going to see action.
I
Right?
would.
But the 300, that's a high bar, Bull.
How many?
I'll take it. You know why I'll take it? It's at the end of the season.
Yeah.
You don't know who you're going to play, who's going to be injured. You could be down in a football game, and we know Kevin Stefanski's propensity. He will throw the ball if he's down. Even when we had Nick Chubb, he was keeping him at 14, 16 carries, right? Like, I think that you can see a game where the Browns are down and they need some scores. They throw the ball, and you look up, he has 40 attempts. He may have a couple of turnovers in that, but I think it's possible he get 300 yards.
I wanted to look at.
Oh, I think it's possible.
I mean,
I just think it's highly unlikely.
If he plays 6 games and he's in one of those 6 games, they're down and they got to throw the football at halftime.
Watch this.
I mean, it's priced
Mike,
like it's gonna
how
happen.
many 300-yard passing games have the Browns had in the last 3 seasons from someone not named Joe Flacco or Jameis Winston?
I mean, that's a loaded question.
I don't think
I think it's 0.
No, I don't think we've done it.
That's
Deshaun never did it. I don't think.
I don't think he did either.
I think the
Hell, we
Titans
were
did.
doing backflips
He
one day
did.
when he went over 200.
let me look at that. Let me think. I know DTR didn't. PJ Walker didn't.
No,
Jacoby
Baker
Brissett?
had it. Baker probably had a few.
Jacoby Brissett, did he have that
Probably had a
11
few.
games he played? Did he have any over 300?
No, I don't think so.
I'll look it up.
I think he was in the twos.
I
We
don't
was
think so.
we was giving his 225, 230.
That's what I say. Once upon a time in the Marino and even in a more recent era, 300-yard passing games were all over the place.
Like candy.
But hell, how many did Patrick Mahomes have last year? And Patrick Mahomes used to sneeze 300-yard passing games.
Hey, they used to.
Do you think that the scoring dip that we saw last year is an aberration?
Nope. Defense has caught up, has figured a lot out. It's more difficult to score points. Defense has more talent. Offensive line play is getting worse. It's going to be a problem. And quarterback play is, you're hoping Jaden Daniels is certainly a step in a direction that suggests these young guys are going to be really good. CJ Stroud hopefully he's going to step back up this year and become more like he was in his rookie year. But you are losing, whether it's Tom Brady, whether it's going to be Aaron Rodgers, as much as disdain as I have for him as a person, was he's going to be a Hall of Famer. But your quarterback play is becoming more questionable, and the offensive line play is becoming more questionable as defensive line play is getting better and better and better.
Yeah. And the cover 2 shells around the league to kind of force teams to run the football. And the whole philosophy is like, we're going to make you work it down the field and hope you make a mistake or a penalty or whatever. And it's working.
Eventually there will be a correction, and maybe through running the ball, but that's not throwing the ball necessarily. So, these things work in cycles. I just don't think we're there yet.
Okay.
They used to give them 300 out, like the doctor used to,
like Oprah giving out cars,
or like your doctor
you get a 300, you get a 300.
Your doctor giving you Vicodins. You can't get none of that no more.
No.
How many 300-yard passing games do you think Jaden Daniels, who had a magnificent rookie season, had?
Did G. Bush just admit that he's part of a drug kill scheme?
What's that?
3.
Mahomes had 3.
I want to say 2.
Jaden Daniels had 1.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Now, the year
they
before,
don't happen as much.
The year before, C.J. Stroud had 6 as a rookie.
Yeah, he destroyed us.
Yeah.
Now they had no running game.
Yeah,
and
but
Washington,
but that's still impressive.
Jaden's thing was he was highly efficient.
And he was
22 of 28.
He had a lot of games between 250 and 280.
Yeah, which I said one day last year, I go 250 is the new 300.
I think you're going too far with that.
No. You can look it up.
I say Jameis Winston went over 300 multiple times last year.
Yeah, I know.
Ask AI. Steve will do
275.
Yeah.
275 is almost. If you throw for 275 and you run into, because Jaden Daniels could have about 60 yards on the ground too.
Yeah, you could.
And I'll be like,
he does have 60 yards.
And when he has them 60, it make it feel like you just. He destroyed us last year.
Yes, he did.
When he made me rethink my whole situation. I think anybody that was wishing for the Browns to be like, yo, we got something here. Let's see what Deshaun Watson.
Fresh out of the university, too.
Man.
Just boom, 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 boom.
He was
we thought that they were going to win that game. We're like,
only one quarterback in the NFL averaged more than 275 per game last season.
Stunning. And I'll guarantee you there was a time when there were more than one quarterback that averaged over 300 a game.
Give me a year.
But there was a time too.
Let's go to.
Let me look at
Go to the Marino, Esiason.
ESPN goes back to 2004 to sort this.
Okay,
so.
well that's
for the sake of this.
Okay, go back 2015.
Jay, those days.
Is there another bet?
For an average of 3
barbershop the other day. I said another thing.
That's. I don't know that he's got it. If he plays 8 games, he.
All of them. That's what I thought.
Absolutely.
Well, make the playoffs.
Yeah, the Bengals missed barely.
Yeah.
They were coming on. If they had another week in the regular season, they would have made it.
Yeah.
30 more seconds in the season they're in. But other thing.
That's. I don't know that he's got it. If he plays 8 games, he has to average 250 yards a game.
Yes.
That's a.
Yeah,
you're
right.
For a rookie, that's a lot.
Yeah.
We just said 260
passing yards plus 300. Are you kidding me? What is going on? That should be like plus 4,000.
This is trying to attract a national audience and obviously Colorado fans. And some people will bet it. I would advise against.
The prices are way off. The books are clean up here. Those are both very, I would say the
new 300.
The prices are
50s.
Wildly off. Stop it.
Look,
prices
I
are wildly
bad.
off.
I just feel bad for the dad who has to explain to his wife and kids that he doesn't have money for Christmas presents because he bet a whole bunch of money on Shedeur Sanders throwing for 2,000 yards when he was potentially the 4th quarterback on the team.
That's wild stuff right there. 2,000 yards plus 300. That's a sucker's bet. Don't do it, people. Don't do it. Wait till once Flacco is named the starter, the odds will shoot up to like plus 1,500, and then take it then. If you're gonna take it at all, still kind of a sucker's bet. But any parting thoughts tonight, Pete? As we hand it over to Garage Beers here in about 60 seconds.
Just that Lane Atkins is dropping a whole bunch of stuff, inside notes that he's heard regarding the team before we hit the training camp. So subscribe and get access to that stuff. Other than that, just keep an eye on everything we're producing, both written and then the video content.
The link to the website and the subscription page is in the description below. Thank you for watching another edition of The React. For Pete Smith, my name is Brad Ward. Have a wonderful evening. Enjoy Garage Beers next with Mike Keefe and the boys. Have a good night.